right, we need base runners. Let's go.
Hey, welcome back to the podcast, everybody. David and Charlie here again with you. And today we've got another guest, Coach Keith Westmoreland. He's here to talk to us about a lot of things. Keith, we're glad to have you today.
Well, Charlie, David, thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to talk to you and reminisce a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. When we were talking about what episode to do next, we're getting ready for the fall season. Some teams have already played. So my thoughts were, every time we talk about fall or get into fall, it's that very first season that we had as a team and I had as a coach. And there's new players out there right now that are playing for the first time ever in travel ball. There's new coaches that are coaching for the first time ever. Parents showing up to travel ball for the first time ever. And I just thought, let's talk about what it's like to form a team and to start new and to see where it can actually go. And I think you're a great story and to talk about and kind of go into that. So just on my end real quick, you took a group of kids starting and going into 8U in the fall with your team, and you took them all the way through 12U and ended up major classification. So that's I would say that's pretty successful. We've got other parameters of success, where the kids happy, where the parents happy and that thing. But wow, what on the field, what a deal. Tell us a little bit about why you started a team. Let's just start there.
Yeah, sure. Well, we moved to Fayetteville when my son was 7 that summer, and so we set up, signed up with FYB to play baseball, and ended up. It was just one of those fate things, that the universe works in this way. But ended up on a team with a couple other coaches and kids. That when that season was over, we kind of had a core already. And the other guys were gung-ho to start something, and I was too. And so fate kind of put us together there. And in that first season, our head coach was actually Ryan Green and Nick Shepakov, whose last name you may recognize. His brother Ben played for the Hogs and played in the Royals organization for a bit, and so we just said, hey, let's figure out how to do this. Had no idea what we were doing. You just start putting one foot in front of the other, and so that's where the beginning of the journey was, to try to figure out how do we do this and under what umbrella do we do it. And we looked at organizations. There's some good organizations around here, as you know, and there's a lot of organizations around here. And so we looked at that possibility. Do we want to be one of those teams? And I think we kind of collectively came to the conclusion that we wanted to differentiate ourselves a little bit. We wanted to have a little bit more control. We wanted to be able to make it a little bit cheaper, a little bit more affordable. Just have it pliable to what we wanted out of it. And so that's how we became affiliated with the Dodgers. And very loosely, as you know, Dodgers are not really an organization. You get access to a little indoor space that Lindsay family made over there for John Ledke to give lessons in. And that's really it. And then you wear your Dodger stuff and you make it however you want.
That's great. So for the listeners out there, you all intents and purposes, an independent team.
Absolutely, an independent team. No team fee, no organization fee. Really, just an independent team. And
so, your story was that at the beginning was very similar to ours. We had a core team. I was coaching FYB. For those listening, that's Fayetteville Youth Baseball. It's rec league. I was coaching 8U in the spring, and we had a similar thing. We had a bulk of kids on that team that wanted to do something different. We went about adding ours a certain way. How did you supplement your core group from as an independent team, how did you find the additional players to round out your roster?
We started advertising a little bit for tryouts. We also had recognized some kids that we had played against, coached
Mm-hmm.
against in FYB that year, identified them, new dads, new parents, new families, um, and so we kind of went and talked to each one of them and said, "Hey, listen, do you want to do this?" Um, we ended up having a tryout with a number of kids that, again, we really had no idea what we were doing. We just went out there and said, let's get them out here and let's hit them some ground balls and let's watch them run, and we'll see if we can make a team. And at this point, we were still just trying to figure out, is this going to work? And I think the key was finding families who felt the same way, um, kids that wanted and needed more challenge. And you surround yourself, when you're making this, you surround it with parents who are bought in and uh, are going to give you the support that you need to make this thing and build it.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened with us. We were able to find all parents that said, "Hey, we want more than the rec league, but we don't want to go to the scary stories that we hear is going on out there. 4 days a week, 80 games a year, and they're 8 and 9 years old, and plus the expense and the just the private lessons necessary and mandated and all this crazy stuff. It's like such a huge leap from rec league to an all-in organization that says we're going to be AAA in a year. Like, I mean, that's their goal, and they're going to try to do it at a young age. But man, that's a big commitment. Families every single weekend almost, right? They're done. So we had the same thing. We had buy-in from parents that said, "Yeah, we want to do more than this, but then let's kind of do it at our pace." And the buy-in from that allowed, and I'm sure you'll tell the same thing, but the buy-in from all the families for us allowed, we didn't have to race to be that next AAA team. We were allowed to develop. We were allowed to lose a few games because we're pitching more kids because it's a great experience. Those kind of things. You know what I'm talking about? And
Yeah,
so they then bought, their kids bought in because the parents bought in, and we all knew that, hey, our time is coming, our time is going to come, but we're gonna develop at our pace, and we're still going to catch up when the days here, and that's kind of pretty much close to where we're at now. We did catch up.
yeah, and it's there's a bit of a feel of um, that you're just kind of cattle at some other places, and you just blend in, and you don't want the kids to the kids, if they're blending in like that, and they're not getting that type of one-on-one instruction, and they're surrounded by all these other teams that have the same name as they do, just a different coach name, and you can fall into I think that can fall into a rut, and I've seen a lot of those teams disappear, combined disappear over the years because I felt like there maybe wasn't a great identity to them, and that's kind of what we set out. Let's make our own identity.
Mhm.
Um,
I
So
want to say too, you're going to find me. I didn't mean to interrupt Charlie, but
that's
real
good.
quick, I- I'm not trying to say that a great teams and great parents can't be involved in an organization, have a team. One of
yeah,
the teams
100%.
that I respect the most out here in 12U Major in Northwest Arkansas is a team that's with a program, an organization, and the dads do it right and everything else. They also had their first set of kids they went through and coached. Then, as soon as they turned out at 14, their sons turned 9. Could you imagine getting to do this again, Keith, and knowing what you know now? Wouldn't that be
Oh,
great?
yeah. Like
But
youth is
back
way
to
younger.
that, yeah. Back to that though, real quick. What is the allure for the parents in an organization? I think I know some, but what do you think that is, just to take your kid to an organization versus maybe giving an independent team a look?
I think that there's probably a, a thought that because they're an organization and they've been doing it, they know what they're doing, and only thing I have to do is drop my kid off there, and they're going to get better. Um, they've been around. This organization has been around, so they obviously know what they're doing and they're doing it right. And as you mentioned a second ago, teams are different. The teams inside these organizations are kind of like their own little independent teams. Now you have a facility fee and you got to pay for the jerseys of that organization and some stuff there that you can cut cost on when you're independent, especially a team fee. But I'm not mentioning any organizations by name, but some around here who have so many teams that certain teams, newer teams, they can't get into the facility. There's not time available for them. And I think that's what some parents find out as they get into it is, well, it sounds really good. And for some, it can be good. But for others, you're still kind of out there on your own trying to find a field, trying to find a facility, trying to find a place to go get reps.
I think another thing parents think about an organization is that the organization leader has an in with the high school teams and
Hmm.
that their kid will have a better chance of making the high school team, especially here where it's very competitive to make the high school team. And they think if you don't play for this particular organization, and y'all probably know which one I mean, that you have no chance to make the high school team. But that's not true. If you look at the kids that made the team this year, there's a lot of different teams represented and some independent teams.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I think that has become even less of a thing as over the past 4 or 5 years, you've actually had some local high schools kind of create a feeder organization um, where they're starting kids out at 8, 9 years old and kind of creating their own organizations that funnels up to the high school. And so that's um, an interesting concept. I think in Rogers, it's
Mm-hmm.
worked pretty well. I know Springdale's trying to do the same thing. It's been talked about in Bentonville. Um, Fayetteville, hasn't really been a thing yet, but um, yeah, that's another way it can be done. And those teams, they're a little bit different. They're kind of an organization, but again, at the end of the day, if you have dads coaching it, um, you are somewhat independent. If you're at a organization, yes, you've got some other fees on top of that, but you're probably not getting any more instruction than you would if you were the Lindsay Dodgers.
Right. You
Comes
talked
down to the
about
parents, right? Go ahead, Trey.
and the coaches. I mean, that's somewhat a roll of the dice because when your kid tries out for a team, you can talk to the coach, but you really don't know whether they know how to teach baseball. There's no way to know that.
No, no, it's a something you got to get into and experience. And
Yeah.
um, as we all know, there are more than one more than one way to do things. And our philosophy was consistency, um, reps, repetitiveness, um, and my experience now has been the consistency of every week. Every week, we're working on these things, and they get better, and they get better, and they get better. And you can't show up. Well, we're not going to have practice this week. We've got something else going on. Dads, I'm busy. Um, we'll just wait till next weekend. Uh, those teams don't get better, and those teams break up. And it's the consistency, and it's the coaches, the dads, the parents that are getting there, that are pouring into the kids, and that's the big thing. You got to commit. You got to pour in and commit, and say, I'm going to give these kids everything I've got, um, and I'm not going to be perfect, and I'm going to make some mistakes, but we're going to be consistent at it, and
Yeah.
that consistency builds over time.
So what do you think about scheduling as far as that goes, like practice consistency? So can you talk about your scheduling philosophy? How many tournaments should you play? How often should you practice relative to how many games you play a year?
Yeah, I think a couple of staples that we always had in our scheduling philosophy was we usually didn't want to play more than 3 weeks in a row during the spring season. So let's start with spring. Um, didn't want to play more than 3 weeks in a row. Uh, I feel like 4 weeks in a row is tough on the kids, and there are people have other things going on in their lives. They have other kids, and they have stuff they want to go do, and so we usually tried to get at least one in before spring break, beginning of the season. Kind of view it as almost as a preseason game. Like you're in the NFL, we're playing a preseason game here, um, and get some reps, kind of get us into the feel of it, and then kind of ramp it up after spring break. But never wanted to play more than three in a row. We did not travel anywhere until we were 10, and a couple reasons to travel. You don't need to travel around Northwest Arkansas. The tournaments here that Mike McKeon and the U-Trip organization, Arkansas Premier, put on, or there's a reason teams come from 4 or 5 states around to come here. We're in a great area, great fields. You don't need to go anywhere, but it's fun to go other places, as we all know. Go up to Branson and play in Ballparks of America. There's a lot of good fields up in Kansas City, and they're good towns to go hang out and be with your families. Take the kids and go to a ball game or whatever. But we didn't travel till we were 10, and then we traveled a little bit more each year, maybe 2 times, 3 times, up to 4 times. And they were always to a place where it was not just about the baseball tournament. It was about something else there. It was about getting the kids together and creating that family and that team feel, and almost a second team building event. Now in the fall, I never wanted to play more than 3 tournaments. That was just our philosophy, to not play more than 3. Big proponent of the kids playing other sports. Way too early to concentrate just on baseball or one sport in general. So we would try to pinpoint 1 month, October usually, and we might start practice at the very end of September, and we would basically go for 4 weeks, maybe 5 weeks, where we would have practices and some games. So roughly a month in the fall is what we spent on baseball, and the rest was playing football. You've got some basketball starting up, and that was how we looked at it.
So, any expectation in the fall that the kids were working on their own, taking pitching lessons?
There were expectations that kids were always working on their own, and that was outlined, because you just can't practice enough as a team to get all the work in. Kids have to put it in on their own. There was never any you have to take lessons. I think what people saw is that if they didn't take some lessons here or there or spend more time on it, then they were going to fall behind. And maybe for some that was fine. And hey, this is the speed at which this is going is not what we want, and that's fine. There's double A, there's rec, there are other outlets for it, but there was an expectation that there is other work being done, and we would outline that to some extent, kind of what expectations were in the off season.
Okay.
Yeah. So practices, they say, they being whoever you read there, who is ever pretending to be an expert on social media, but it's true. Practice is more important from 12 and under than playing in games as far as development goes. I believe it. And I know you did a really good job of running your practices, and we can get into how we know each other through baseball here in a minute. But as far as the development side, what was the most challenging for you seeing your team develop in pitching, hitting, fielding, maybe just baseball IQ, baseball base running? What was the most challenging aspect to develop, and how did you address it?
I think it depended on the day of the
Everything.
week.
Coaches out there like everything.
I think honestly the toughest thing to develop was the mental side and the acceptance baseball being a game of failure, and that it's okay to strike out, and that it's okay to make an error, and it's it's how we react to it and our body language and how we carry it forward or not carry it forward with us. That's what I saw as being the hardest thing to mold and develop, even up through 12 years old when we stopped. And going back to the physical development of it, as a coach, and especially as you get started and you get into kid pitch and you need to develop arms, it can be hard to not fall into that trap of, I want to win these pool games, okay, and I'm going to squeeze an extra inning out of my best two pitchers to win these pool games because they're wins, and that can I've been guilty, very guilty of falling into that trap, and you've got to develop. You've got to get more kids on the mound. The more you can get on the mound, the better. And but there is a fine line. If you don't do enough winning, then the kids get down, the parents get down, and ultimately you probably won't have a team. So you have to balance that winning and that development. And that's, as a coach, I've always found that was the hardest thing to do, is
Yeah,
to
and you're
balance
just
those
hitting
things.
home, Keith, because that's exactly what we deal with all the time as we're trying to get to different levels of this thing. And it's so easy to say, I'm going to throw, well, let's just put in our dude and shut this down so we can make sure we win this game. And then the next we'll play game, what is it's house money, and then who cares? At least we're not last. And you know, uh, but
Yeah,
is that really the right thing to do, or do you need to get little Timmy over here that's got one inning in all year? He needs some work because he does have a little potential. It's
yeah,
tough, man. I don't know the right answer. I know the wrong answer is going above pitch counts. That's a whole nother podcast topic, Charlie, that we're going to get into soon. And we're going to have an arm specialist on here, a pitching coach or something. And that is something I can get fired up about because there's no reason to be going over pitch counts for these kids at this age. There's no, and now I'm on my soapbox. Now I'm upset. But it's like they say, oh, well, he's a bigger kid. He can handle it. No, he's still 9, 10, or 11, or 12. I don't care that he's a little bit. His tendons have not formed yet.
yep,
I
yep.
mean, what the heck is going on?
Major League
Anyway,
Baseball players have pitch counts, so
uh,
even your big 10-year-old needs to have one too.
I mean,
Yeah, and that's one thing that I think U-Trip could do better on is, U-Trip has an innings count, Perfect Game has a pitch count, and an innings count is, it's just not as it's not as good at limiting as just a straight pitch count is.
Hmm.
And so I prefer the pitch count. We always kept them. We were very hyper aware, checking game changer. I always had my game changer going during the game and knowing pitch counts. Um, you don't want to get lost in a game and look down and a kid's at his 120th pitch for the weekend. That's just that's a bad place to be. And you see some kids get used like that, and it's tough to watch.
Hmm.
I've known of multiple kids that we've played against for years that have had arm problems and even arm surgeries at this young age. And
Wow.
that's just that's not something that should be happening.
so let's just step back just a minute and say somebody's listening to this, or it gets passed to somebody who's thinking about starting a team. Um, Keith, was it just as easy as starting just signing up with U Trip and getting a name, or was there a little more into it? What all was into it? Because I've got my list.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we there was another Dodger team that was a little bit older than us, coached by a guy named Kyle Cook, who works over at Lindsay, and um, I knew him previously, and that's how we decided to do that. And they had a practice field that you're intimately aware of, and um, and
Great
so
fit.
yeah, and so hey, we've got someone who knows how to order the uniforms. We've got someone who knows where to tell us to go. He knows where the bathroom is, and so that's we kind of latched on to Kyle and that team, and they were great in sharing those things with us. That as a new coach, as a new team, you don't know what you're doing, and so that was extremely helpful, and that's kind of where it started right there. And so we knew we'd be Dodgers. We knew we'd have access to that little indoor over at Lindsay. Um, we already had a couple of kids starting to take lessons from Coach L over there, and now we had a practice field. So now we had the foundation laid, and and we ended up taking that first year. We ended up carrying 13 kids on that team
That's crazy.
uh, in 8U. Now you played 10 in the field because you
So we
played.
didn't start till 9. I have no idea.
Well, in eight, yeah, in
Yeah.
coach pitch you play four outfielders. So
Okay.
we had 13, but you have a kid sitting on the pitcher's mound. So you had 10 kids on the
And
field.
you're throwing no hitters.
Um,
You had the
Brian,
best ERA in the league.
Brian Green was the pitcher.
Okay.
He, which thank God, because I I have nightmares thinking about being a coach pitch and being out there and absolutely losing the ability to throw a strike to my own kids. Um, that would keep me up at night. And thank God Ryan Green had a rubber arm and could put that ball wherever he wanted. And
That's
um,
a big part of coach pitch. Even, I mean, we did rec at coach pitch, but it's a big part,
Mhm.
of
oh
whether the
yeah,
kids can hit the ball. You don't
oh
want to
yeah,
put too much arch on it because it's almost like hitting a curveball, but you don't want to throw it too hard on a bullet because then they can't catch up with it. So it's a fine line of just kind of flicking your wrist and getting it in there.
yeah.
It's an art.
No, and the other coach, Nick Shepakov, he pitched when we were in seven and doing a coach pitch at FYB. He pitched, and so thankfully none of them, or thankfully I never had to pitch, and all the other guys pitched because all my boys who I pitched to in batting practice over the years know that I would not have been the best choice to be the designated pitcher in coach pitch. But that was the toughest thing. So I became head coach after 8U into 9U. Um, in getting a roster, we had too many kids. Um, we had to pare the roster down, and um, I believe we ended up with 11. You and I talked about, what we feel is the right number, and um, we ended up with 11. We've played with 10, we've played with 12. Um, 11 was always kind of where I settled at. I felt like it at 11, I didn't have one kid on the bench. I had two. Um, I could I could sub them in one at a time or as a package. It gave you a little bit of insurance on injury. My son's team this year, one of the players just completely ripped his knee up in a football game and is out for a year. And so we were so fortunate to never have any major injuries like that. Um, so the depth piece never was a thing for us, but I saw it all the time with other teams, and I saw teams struggle to have to go find a guest player every weekend just so they'd have a sub, and their kids wouldn't have to play every single inning in the heat. And so that was always my deal. That's not a right or wrong answer. It was 11 was always kind of my number where I fell at on.
I wish there was a mentor program. In business, I've kind of had to be involved in some of those with some of the companies that I've worked for in the past, and kind of roll my eyes occasionally if how that kind of plays out politically. But I wish there was a website somewhere out there that you could say, "Hey, I'm interested in coaching," and then coaches could say, "Hey, I'm interested in just we may be 10 states away, but I will be a resource for you. I will help you," because I think there's a lot of really good dads and moms out there that just would be great at coaching. They don't know how to go about it. They don't know how to get into it. And maybe they're a little nervous of doing the whole, I'm going to do the organization, jump in by fire. I wish there was a way to do it. I was writing down some things last night. The list got kind of long of just things that you have to do as a coach. Um, Got to buy uniforms. Where do you go to do that? How, just If you don't know, you're going to spend 2 hours looking up where to buy uniforms and did you get the
Hmm.
best deal? You don't know. You got to collect money. That's part of the job. You got to buy all the baseball stuff. You got to buy balls. You got to buy lineup cards. You need to buy tees for your batting practice. You need to buy, the bands for your arms, dugout helmet holders, bat racks. If it's hot, fans and misters, buckets to hold the balls, rosin bags for some teams, bags to hold all the practice stuff, cones and bug spray and first aid kits. And then you got to do a banner for the dugout. And if you're going to do social media for your team, a Facebook or Instagram page, you got to do that. You got to have somehow to have parent communication. So you're going to have to set up group me or some other sort of thing and run that. You can put all the time into the practice plans, which nobody really sees. There's a lot of time into the practice plans, and you taught me that is if you're going to do this, we're going to make it like a business agenda, and it's timed out, and we print it out, and it looks like a business agenda, and here we go, and we divide up on 5, 6 people helping to practice to get small groups. There's a lot of time to figure out how to make a practice work smartly. Scheduling tournaments, field maintenance, if that's part of your gig. Some teams like to fundraise. I mean, can I go on? What did I miss? And
Yeah. You
and
basically just named off every item in my garage.
yeah,
Um, yeah, no, and don't, what I would tell someone is don't be afraid to just copy. Um, go watch some other teams practice. Go make notes on what they're doing. I went and watched other practices. I copied off other coaches. There are not a lot of great things about the internet at the moment, but one of them is that it's very easy to find practice plans. Um, and many outlets to show you effective ways to run a practice.
I think even
Uh,
so, though, Keith, you get nervous your first time coaching out there. I played sports in high school. I mean, I've been around the process, right? But when it's your job to be in charge of the kids, and you question yourself a little bit. Am I doing the right things? And I remember uh, you were so kind. You let me come out to your practices, and I was real nervous driving out there. Like, man, are we even doing the right things? I mean, we've talked about doing. I think I'm doing the right things. I've talked to him about it, but how is it ran? How are the players, the engagement? And of course, I didn't get to watch. You pulled me out in the field and made me work. But it was. I went back, and all the coaches were like, "How was it?" And I'm like, "I think we're doing okay."
yeah.
I mean, we don't have the results yet that we want, but I think we're doing the right things. And that was so encouraging because you had already reached a high level, and we were kind of mimicking what you were doing. And to your point of mimicking, don't be afraid to start a team. It's the greatest thing that'll ever happen to you. Besides all the headaches and all the work, when you see your kid or you see the team take a step up, and that turns into like confidence in life and those kind of things, what a better way to spend your time.
Right,
I
right.
mean, just do it if you have even an inkling in your body that I could be a better coach than what I've seen out there, then just go do it. You'll figure it out. But go up and find somebody that's done it well, that's respected, ask around. And I bet $5 if you went up to them and said, "Can I pick your brain and have lunch with you and talk?" They're going to say yes. I would. I'll do
100%.
the whole podcast
Yeah.
right now. If you're sitting there thinking about starting a team and you don't know, go find us on Facebook and send me a messenger, and I'll call you back. I'd love it.
If they're doing it and have been doing it, it's not because they don't love it. It's because they love it. They love what they're doing. They feel the impact they're making, and so they're definitely going to want to talk about it. It's why I wanted to talk about this, even though I stopped last year. And last year was the first time where I was in the stands. I still love reminiscing about that time with those kids, and and it makes me feel nice and warm and fuzzy inside when I see them. And from across the room, I hear a Coach Keith,
Mm-hmm.
and so that I'll always be that to them, and that's special to me.
I
Well,
do think that volunteer dads who coach get a bad rap to a certain degree, as opposed to paid coaches. But I do, from what I've seen, the volunteer dads really care about the development of the team, the development of your son on the team. He really wants the best for the team, is invested in it, like you said. So I think there's a lot of benefits to having a knowledgeable volunteer parent coaching. especially at the younger levels.
I would say that my biggest strength and at times my biggest weakness was how much emotionally invested I was in it. And uh,
David has the same problem.
yes, and it is. You treat one of them. You start to feel like each one of them is your son,
Yes.
and you want the absolute best for them, and you're protective of them, and um, that's just how it is. And again, that's a huge strength as well. And to me, measuring success in this world that we're talking about, there's so many different ways to measure success, and certainly the most obvious one is wins and losses. And I think that one shouldn't be at the top of the list. Um, it maybe becomes a little bit more important as they get older, and fine, whatever. I measured success. Um, are the kids enjoying it? And number one, are they coming back the next season? If your kids are coming back the next season and want to continue to play, then you're doing something right. It means they're getting a little bit better. It means they're enjoying it. And if they want to come back and play, that should be, to me, the first measure of, are you doing this correctly?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, as far as keeping the teams together, you do have more control as an independent coach, don't you? Right? We've heard of the organizations that have two or three teams per age group,
Mm-hmm.
and the highest classification team needs a couple more, and they go plundering the AAA or AA to get up, whatever, or AAA plunders AA or AA single, whatever. Um, and that's what do you want out of it, I guess, is what you have to ask as a parent. Do you want your kid to try to stay with a group of kids and a coach and stay a family, or do you just want to go chase wins and rings every single season because they're out there too?
Yeah,
um,
you can find that. If that's what you want, you
it's
you can
there.
find that.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly.
I can tell you that my son would definitely not be having as much fun if he wasn't playing with this particular group of kids year to year, because those are his best friends.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's also something that comes up every year. It's like when is the time to maybe not play with my buddies and go and play on a team that maybe these buddies are going to split up and go to different high schools. So should I be playing over here with someone that I'm going to be a teammate with in high school? Um, and at what point is it start to become less youth baseball and more into
I don't know.
um,
What's the answer? Because
I
it's
and I
talked
don't
about
yeah, I
13,
don't really
14.
know. I don't really know.
It's not
I mean,
before 12, though, in my
it's
opinion.
definitely not before 12. No,
No.
I still, when we ended at 12, I still had six kids that were originals, um, that were original coach pitch, 8-year olds. And there's, three of them now still together on a 14-year-old team, and there's a couple more that have been around for. I coached them starting at 10, and another one I started coaching 11. They make up that team, so there's still a group, a solid group of kids that were together 10, 11, 12 that have now been together at 13 and now 14 as well. So and we're from all over the place. My son's team now is um, there's four Fayetteville high school kids. There's Rogers. There's some Shiloh. There's in Oklahoma, Mountain Home, Valonia. So they're kind of from all over the place. And part of that is as teams get older, you see more consolidation. There's there are less teams. Kids fall out of baseball. Um,
Yeah, what's the number on that, Charlie? You told me at one point, what, at 13 or 14, how many leave? Do you remember?
Oh,
Was
the
that you that told?
percentage of
Yeah,
kids that stop playing at 13? Yeah,
yeah.
I'm not sure. It's a lot for
It
sure.
was like 70%, I think you told me.
Yeah.
I mean, it was an astronomical number because
But I
basically
think
after
part of that
12,
is,
people just like, I'm done.
yeah. I think part of that is when your kid is 13, 14 years old, they start doing what they want. And the parents can't necessarily make them play baseball anymore. So I think that's
sure,
it to some degree.
sure.
Or they play another sport, they get good at football, decide to focus only on football or basketball, whatever it is.
You mentioned, the passion of dads, um, and a term that we all hear all the time is daddy ball. And what is daddy ball? What does that look like? What's the definition of it? And I think all of us would understand it as it's a dad coach who plays his kid favors and plays him shortstop and pitcher and catcher and
Yep.
hits him in the three hole. Whatever the case may be. I was always very conscious of not being labeled daddy ball,
Hmm.
and I think one thing I learned throughout that process is that you can go too far the other way, and I think you have to be self aware um, in am I being fair to my own kid? Um, am I so worried about some person over there labeling me as a daddy ball coach because my son hit in the three hole that I'm going to hit him in the seven hole every day and every game, and nobody's going to call me a daddy ball coach. And I think after I was done coaching, I saw that maybe I went a little bit too far that way. Um, and kind of my self assessment after the fact. Um, I always sat my son first. I always um, he
Keith,
never
this is
played the infield.
so. Last night, I'm sitting here making the lineup for today's scrimmage, our first scrimmage of the year, and we have a really good hitting team. And there's just not a lot of. Sometimes we don't hit great, but there's not a lot of variance between 1 and 10. They're all pretty good. And I was sitting here and I'm like, man, I don't want to make this lineup because man, I hate making the 7, 8, and 9, 10 holes because they're not really 7, 8, 9, 10 holes, and I can flip them around. And I'm like, well, so I start making this lineup. I'm like, well, I shouldn't put Gavin second, my son, because probably better. Well, let's do it by batting average. Well, oh my, that puts my son at the top. I don't want anybody to think it's just from last year. So, so I ended up, how do I do this? And I don't need to go in to what I did, and you'll find out today, Charlie. But it was literally on my mind. I don't want people to think I'm doing that. Now, I'll be honest. With my son in the field, I daddy balled him in center field. I did, and I felt that I was putting the time in, and I created this team for him. And he didn't play every single inning out there, but when he played, that's where he played because he's short, he's left-handed, and he's fast. So that's where he's going to end up playing someday. So that's where I played him. I never daddy balled him in batting. I can promise you that. And I've never daddy balled any other coaches, and they don't want their sons to be that way.
Right.
We all agreed on that. Because the fear of that perception is that you're the daddy ball team. You don't want to be that because you see them out there.
No,
100%.
I remember the very first game that we played with the Dodgers. You sent me a text the night before, and I think you said Dylan's batting fifth or sixth, something like that, and Gavin's going to bat last because someone has to bat last in the first game, and it's just going to have to be Gavin.
I didn't want to be perceived as that,
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's certainly something to think about, and I think you just kind of have to. Sometimes, so if your kid deserves it, you got to play him where he deserves it, where he's earned it,
Yeah.
and not worry about what anybody else thinks when they look at it.
Yeah.
Now,
Hey,
one of the things we would do during pool games that I think was an interesting strategy, and I think one of our other coaches came up with it. My other two coaches these last few years were Derek Deaton and Jeff Farver, and we created a lineup that was kind of a lineup that you could flip. The bottom and the top were very interchangeable, and the middle was kind of roughly the same, and so you could flip it. And so the kid that hit last in game one is going to hit first in game two, and we'd have somebody who was high OBP in the one hole and high OBP in the 10 hole. So we did that.
That's interesting. I might need to talk to you a little bit more off the side on that, because you want to do they have to learn that you have to earn things, But when you get a group of kids that are all really fairly well prepared competitively, you don't want to demoralize some kid either because you keep batting in a position that's you don't even think is bad, but
Mhm.
the world thinks it is, or the buddies at the park. What are you batting on your team?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
well, I bat ninth, but I'm better than you, who bats fourth on your team. It's hard for the kids to still understand. So that's it.
Um,
So I was talking notes last night, Keith. Were you harder on your son than other kids?
um, if I'm being honest with myself, probably. Um, I probably was. And again, that goes back to just an honest self-assessment after the fact. Um,
I think you could easily walk up to any baseball practice and tell whose kid belongs to what coach because it's who they're being the hardest on.
yeah. Well, it's funny. You've seen the videos of some of the funny baseball personalities on social media that, hit nice soft ground balls, and then when it's your, you
Yeah,
know, you turn it into Mark McGuire hitting them ground balls.
yeah.
Um, so again, I think that's a little bit of the overcompensation. I'm not going to be seen as taking it easy on my kid.
Well, I
Hmm.
think you also have high expectations for your own kid and you know what they're capable of. And
Sure.
you expect them to perform at their top level. And so when they're goofing off or not paying attention, doing things that every other kid is doing, it's somehow, I don't know, it reflects on you or something. But yeah, I think I see every single dad doing exactly the same thing.
I think where we really held our kids, the coaches, to a higher standard was in how they conducted themselves and their attitudes, how they treated their teammates. Because you are one of the coach's kids, and you whether you like it or not, or whether it's fair to you or not, that's who you are. You're one of the coach's kids, and people look at you and notice how you behave. And so you have to I think you do have to hold them to a little bit of a higher standard as far as the leadership and setting an example for the other players on how we don't throw helmets, we don't throw bats, we keep our head up and walk back to the dugout without going into a rage because we struck out or because we made an error. So that's one thing I do feel pretty strongly about is um, they do need, from a behavior standpoint, to be held to a little higher standard, maybe.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's hard, man. I was, and Charlie tested this at some point in 10, towards the end of it. I just handed my son off to other kids in practice because I was not being the best dad I could be.
No,
I wasn't in a good
we've all
spot, and
been
that
there.
doesn't
We've
come
all been.
over. That doesn't make the rest of the team want to play for you either when they see you out there,
Yeah.
all over your son, kind of to an extreme. But I knew he could do more than he was doing sometimes, and that just irritate me so much. And then yeah, I mean, how is everybody else supposed to practice hard if you don't? But so what I did is I took a real self-assessment kind of, at that season about halfway through, and I went up to Charlie and Dale, her husband, and they helped with the outfield a lot back then, and I just said, he's yours. I said, I'm done. I'm not going to say a word to him. I just can't. And I don't know. Maybe he started getting a lot better right after that. I mean, I think Charlie would attest. I think he needed me to lay off of him because his
Yeah.
buy-in was better, his performance was better, and then he just took off at 11. And I've made it a real conscious effort to. I mean, sure, if I got to get after them because they're running bases, in practice, and I'll bark at him a little bit. But as far as me getting after him the way I was, I've backed off. So I think that it's real easy for coaches, I guess, is my
That's
point.
the flip side of daddy ball is
Yeah,
that the kids whose dads are coaching have it a lot tougher.
100%. Yeah. And that's something you really got to be conscious of. You think you're doing that. You think that it's correct. I'm handling this correct. I am holding my son to a higher standard. We're not going to be playing daddy ball. And what you don't realize is you may be making it not very much fun for him,
Hmm.
for your
I think
son.
that's what happened with my son. He started having fun again after I laid off of him a little bit.
I mean, my
I think that. I don't know. I could be wrong. Charlie spent more time with him in practice now than I did.
Gavin's hard to read, but I
Yeah,
do think he's having fun.
he's
my
very.
son had his best season ever, and really found another level of love for the game at 13 after I stopped coaching him.
Yeah.
So, and that's great. That's one thing that we always did. It wasn't a lot of teams just kind of they just kind of end. It just ends. It implodes. They go into the off season with the thought that they're going to continue to be a team, and they figure out that people maybe weren't enjoying it, and they leave, and there is no team anymore. And see it happen a lot. Um, we were very fortunate in that we always stayed together, and we had a core that always stayed together. And we had some pieces that were added here or there, but for the most part, the core stayed together. And we had a plan for 2 years that 12 was going to be it. We really just felt strongly. Myself and Jeff and Derek felt very strongly that 12 was you go to the big field or bigger field in 13, and they're becoming young men. They're going through puberty. They've had us for 4 or 5 seasons. It's time for someone who's not their dad to be coaching them, and it worked out well for us. I think it was the right thing, at least for us in that group, to stop at 12. Not saying that it has to be like that for everyone, but it worked well for us. The kids, I could feel at 12 that the kids were ready to hear
Hmm.
another voice. They'd
Well,
been
that's part of
hearing.
adolescence too, is that it's completely natural for boys going through puberty to stop listening to their parents.
I
It's
mean,
time
I
to
did.
leave the tribe.
I didn't. I listened to my parents.
I bet.
Yeah,
All the way.
right. Hey,
Yeah.
Keith, what was your feeling on classifications? I mean, that's such a hot topic, every year out here where it's sometimes it's led by the organization, sometimes it's led by coaches, sometimes it's led by parents just trying to find another team on a different classification. And so, I mean, single A, double A, triple A, major. Did you guys have any goals to reach one or the other, and what were your thoughts, kind of like on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Obviously started out as a double A team. I think, and I don't even remember if we classified ourselves as a double A team or if
I think
Mike.
you're auto classified double A, and then you go up
Are
or
you?
down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so the goal was always to organically improve and compete at wherever you deserved to compete at. And we spent 8U and 9U as a double A team, having average success. We could look really good. We could not. But we were just very slowly getting better. Our 9U year, which was a COVID year, which was that became a very weird summer. We played one tournament in March, and then they canceled everything, and we didn't restart until June. So basically, the whole meteor season was gone. And I went back and looked. I remembered that we had lost a lot of close games, and I went back and looked earlier, and I think we had 12 losses, and 9 of them were by 1 or 2
Mm.
runs. And so we were a team that was learning how to win. These kids were learning how to win. What does it look like to finish off a game? Losing the fear a little bit. And once you get over that hump, things can really take off. And so that fall, we took off. So that would have been fall of 10U. And I think we won 11 or 12 games that fall and won our first 2 tournaments we'd ever won. And then it had kind of started to click with the kids.
So did you get pushed up to the AAA, or did you hold up
Actually,
your hand and ask to go?
no, we got bumped. Again, it was coming out of COVID, and they did not bump anyone up in the off season between fall and spring. So we went into spring of 10U as a double A team, knowing we were better than a double A team, and we would get bumped pretty quick. And we won our first tournament and got bumped. So we were only a double A team for one tournament, but we got bumped, and I will say there was a few people involved in our team who were a little it was a little disconcerting to them that we'd been bumped. We started to win.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God,
Exactly.
Charlie, does that sound familiar?
Yeah. And I understand that. But if the boys had deserved to play in an open tournaments, and that's where they should play. And they're not going to get better beating up on teams that are worse than them. They're not
Well,
as
what are your thoughts on teams who haven't, let's just say, have not won a tournament in Double A, and then they raise their hand and go, "We're going to go Triple A," and they can do that.
great. I mean, your kids are going to get better playing better competition. I mean,
Yeah,
that's not a big secret. Um,
I
I,
don't know. I think there's some teams out there that I think that what I'm getting at is there's some teams out there, and this isn't not just in our area; it's across the country. The mom and dad want to say that their kid plays for a Triple A team. The coach wants to say he coaches a Triple A team, and they go before they're ready. And I think that was the kind of where I was getting at.
yeah. I mean,
I see it now. I don't know how it was when you guys were here.
yeah, I can see that, and by if you do that, you're gonna have a lot of losses, and you're gonna have kids that stop having fun,
Oh yeah,
and at the end of the season, you're not gonna have a team.
Well, it's how you balance fun and development because certainly playing better teams is better for development, but it's not necessarily better for fun.
No, it is not, and that goes back again to the whole balancing act of
Yeah.
how do we have fun, how do we develop, how do we keep them coming back, and um, and so one thing you're doing today is another thing I loved and was a big proponent of, and that is scrimmages.
mm-hmm.
Go make friends with all your coaching counterparts and have scrimmages and get your 9, 10, and 11 pitcher that maybe is not getting into a pool game or a bracket game in a tournament and get them on the mound against other hitters, live game like atmosphere. And I think that's especially for pitchers, catchers, hitters. Those scrimmages are huge. Uh, Really arm development, getting some confidence. You get a kid who maybe has a hard time throwing some strikes, and you get him in a situation where he's throwing against kids that aren't his teammates, but he knows it's just practice and scrimmage. Build some confidence that way. I think is a really important thing to do.
Plus, these kids are competitive and they want to play against someone else. They
Right.
do get tired of practicing.
For sure.
You know,
Yeah, and to those people thinking about starting a team, as you just mentioned, Keith, the community out there, if you dive into it and make friends, and then your sons make friends on other teams, and it's just good. It's just good community people and networking. Today we're playing a team. We rented a field for 3 hours. We know this coach. We've spent time with him and his kids, and our kids have helped out his team before. We're going to do it for 3 hours, but we're going to take a break in the middle and share some watermelon, and the kids are all going, you know what I mean?
perfect.
Amazing times that we wouldn't have if I hadn't said, okay, I'm just going to start this, even though I don't know what I'm doing. He said he'd be there for me, and that was the deciding factor because I didn't know if I could do this. So I appreciate it.
No, it's certainly a leap. It is a leap, and you have got to find ways to build things like you're doing today into it. We would show up sometimes with no intention to practice. You could feel the kids just kind of dragging a little bit, and they'd show up thinking they were going to practice, and we'd throw out the wiffle balls and the wiffle ball bats or
Mm.
kickball and open up coolers full of Gatorades and you know snacks and stuff and cook burgers out there, and we'd bring everybody out and everybody sit around in their lawn chairs, and the parents would all bond and hang out, and the kids would have fun, and it was a big a big sigh of relief, I guess, sometimes from the kids. Like, it's you can feel when you're there with them every practice. You can feel when it's
Hmm.
when they're hitting a wall. You can feel when it's
Yeah.
becoming a really hard grind, and that's part of the fun
Hmm.
of it. That's
Hmm.
my my biggest influence was my little league coach Billy Cotton in Rogers, and he's about to start his 50th year of coaching.
Oh
Wow.
my goodness.
Still coaching Rogers youth baseball. Just finished year 49, and I remember those were the greatest summers of my life, and how I felt about baseball, and I wanted to marry that with with what we have now, travel ball, and tried to, with the independent team, way we were doing it, try to marry those things. Let's be good. Let's be competitive. Let's get better. But let's retain. Let's retain the kid part of this, because this shouldn't feel like work and a job to them.
No, that's great. I got two questions before we wrap it up today. Um, One, would you do it again?
I'd do it again in a heartbeat.
What would you do different? I have an answer already, and I'm not done.
What would I
David's
do?
got a few kids in mind.
A couple things that I might do different. I I think I think I would just I would take the time to pause and appreciate a little bit more what we were doing and how we were affecting the kids positively. And you blink and it's over, and you get frustrated by the most mundane, ridiculous things that you shouldn't get frustrated by. Like, oh, we lost this pool game, or gosh, we got more 8 a.m. games, or
Yeah, those
but
suck.
you're out there doing it. You're out there doing it, and
Mm.
one day I used to tell our parents, I would go around and pick up kids a bunch, and some parents just needed more help than others because of their schedules and stuff, and I would tell them, it's not any big deal, because one day we're not going to have any kids to take to practice anymore, and those days are getting closer. But I think I would just slow down, and try not to get um, tunnel vision into some of the things that maybe at the end of the day don't matter. Embrace more of the big picture. Embrace the kids having a good time. Embrace watching them be with each other, and that would probably be the biggest thing that I would look back on and want to change. And
That's perfect.
I think we could say that about our lives, really.
Mhm. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree if you were saying that. I was like, that's a better answer than I had. So it's like making me feel bad, Chief.
Well, what's
But
your would you
well,
do?
mine's more functional, and I think if you're gonna start a team out there and you're listening, it's this something that I wish maybe I would have done earlier, right? So I was pretty clear in that we were going to not do directly, but we were going to be more, but we weren't going to go crazy. Okay, that was as to the extent that I went as far as setting up standards for players. And at that age, not all of them know if they even want to play baseball. They're just out there.
Yeah, yeah,
And I always thought, well, we don't need to say any more than we did, because as soon as a kid doesn't want to do it, they'll just quit. But I think a lot of coaches will find out that that's not always the case. And I think I would have put in a standard of behavior with year end, and most coaches do this, but I don't, year end reviews, and just and kind of head some stuff off that lingered a little bit as far as kids that didn't really want to be there. Great kids, great families, just
right.
they're not playing baseball today, and they probably should have stopped then. I think that those kind of things when you're starting a team are kind of critical, as well as it's over communication. It's this is what we're going to do, instead of just kind of relying on, well, it'll work itself out.
Yeah. Well, you
And I,
can't.
I could have been better at that. I mean, self assessment, I could have been better in a lot of ways, but
Yeah.
that's one of them I think I could have done.
Parents love communication. You can't communicate too much, and it's funny now. My son's 14-year-old team. We have his coach has a contract and a code of conduct to sign, and I think that's great.
Mm. Yeah, we ended up making one in the kind of halfway through the 10U season. We had the kids recite it and parents agree to it, and it was a game changer for sure. And it's interesting now. So your son's in kind of high level 13, 14-year-old travel ball, high level, and they got contracts. That's very interesting for me to hear.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's and it makes a lot of sense to me. We are now getting certainly past the stage of crying after strikeouts, and
Yeah.
Some of the
Just the
stuff that
parents
we're
are
all
crying
dealing with.
after strikeout.
Yeah. Parents are crying in the stands, um, but I think it totally makes sense. The kids had to read it and sign it and understand it, and now there should be no question. If you throw your helmet, if you strike out and you throw your helmet in the dugout, hey, you're going to sit down. And by the way, high school coaches, you do that in high school. Believe me, they got another kid that can fill your spot.
That for sure.
So that stuff's got to get cleaned up, and you have to understand that there's no more place for it.
Well, I appreciate you stopping by today. Again, this podcast wouldn't exist if it wasn't for you. My version of the Dodgers wouldn't exist. So, I mean, I know you're happy and proud when you see the kids that you coach, but you see my little guys running around town with Dodger hats. I mean, you got to feel good about that too. So
I,
we
I
just,
feel any Dodger hat I see, I feel good about it because I know that we had some little part in that, and if it wasn't for the Dodger teams before us, then we wouldn't have existed, and so it's a community, and it does take a village in this little section that we have. It takes a village to make these things work, and you have great parents. We had great parents, but that's what I would tell people. First off, surround yourself with good people. Surround
oh my
yourself with good
goodness.
parents. The rest of it, good kids. The rest of it will work itself out. You put the effort in. You put the energy in. Um, you'll get the same thing back out.
Yeah,
Right
I would
on.
like to say 10 other things after that because it inspires me, but that was the perfect ending. So thank you for summarizing that because I truly believe that to be the case. If anybody, I've said this a couple times, if you're out there and you're thinking about coaching and you don't know what to do, go find the Travel Ball Experience on Facebook, send a messenger message to me. I or Keith, either one, will reach out to you. I know where his heart is. We just want to help people and kids, and I don't care if you're in. I guess I'll even help people in Oklahoma. I don't know, but no, I'm just kidding to our
But
friends
not
over there.
Joplin.
But no, nobody from Joplin. No, oh my God, you're gonna get me in trouble. Um, we would seriously we'll help you all we can, and we may not be perfect, but we've been through it enough now to at least give you some direction, and we can be there to help you along the way. So with that, I guess we'll get ready for our scrimmage today, Charlie. We got to meet out here in a little bit, and everyone else, we'll see you at the ballpark.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.